Is Cam Akers worth a top 15 pick in 2021? That and much, much more coming up on another episode of the Football Guys Mailbag Show. Thank you for tuning in to yet another episode. Just a reminder that you can send your questions into mailbag at footballguys.com for Troy and myself to go over. We're bringing you the show every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to start off by answering all of these submitted questions that we've received through the weeks, but be sure to start dropping those comments dropping more questions in the comments, because Troy and I will get to those at the end of the show. And lastly, be sure to subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/footballguystv to see this show, 2 Point Stance with Lauren Carpenter and myself, the Audible, the Dynasty show, the Dynasty newsletter show, and everything else that the Football Guys team has to offer. So, Troy, let's hear it. Is Cam Akers worth a top 15 pick for you?
Yes, definitely. And I know that there's been a lot of hate where Cam Akers recently, or not hate necessarily, but there's been a lot of people who are all of a sudden worried about Darrell Henderson being a thing. I'm sorry. Cam Akers, towards the end of last season, he showed us why he could be one of the legit running backs in this league. It wouldn't be surprising to me if he ends up as an RB1. I don't have him ranked that way. I have him just outside of RB1 status, but I do believe that he's worth a top 15 pick, in terms of getting him early second, because I would love to, I would love to have him as my second running back, but if he's your RB1, I think that he can definitely live up to the hype, because again, with that offense, with Stafford, I just feel like the whole offense is going to look a little bit crisper, and he's going to get the dump offs. He's going to get the goal line work. So I'm very confident in him.
So first of all, I got to say, I love that you called out Stafford, because I feel like people aren't talking about what a just monumental, huge upgrade that is for this team. I mean, not only does Matt Stafford get the best coach that he's ever played with, but Sean McVay, who hasn't really been able to do. I mean, he's had a lot of success. He went to a Super Bowl, but it seemed like he was always hampered by Jared Goff. So I do agree with you. I think that there is a huge upgrade with Matthew Stafford there, but I do not agree with you that I think that Cam Akers should be a top 15 pick, unfortunately. I looked at the consensus over at Football Guys, and we've got him ranked as RB12 overall. I personally have him as my RB14, so just slightly below that. But I was actually kind of shocked to see this, because it seems like there's a lot of hype for Cam Akers. He finished the season on a tear. People got really excited. But of all the people that we have on the Football Guys staff, not a single one of them has Cam Akers as a top 10 or I'm sorry, higher than top 10 running back. Top 10 is where he's capped out. So when I'm looking at that, there's some other guys that are going to go before Cam Akers. Travis Kelce, Devontae Adams, if Aaron Rodgers can get things worked out over there, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, A.J. Brown. So even those, that handful of receivers right there, and Travis Kelce, and then, the 10 running backs before, I think it's kind of tough to see him actually going in the top 15. We've seen one running back under Sean McVay that was able to take on a bell cow row, and that was Todd Gurley. And we know that didn't end too well. And obviously that was a different scenario, because, he had a degenerative disease. He had arthritis, which was just like, his kneecaps were falling apart. So it was a little bit different there. But I think that's got to be in the back of the mind for Sean Payton, right? Like, he doesn't want to do this again. He doesn't want to run another running back the way that he ran Todd Gurley. And last year, of all the games that Cam Akers played, he only saw more than 66% of his team snaps in one single game. So when I'm looking at the rankings there's some guys even that are technically behind on the consensus than Cam Akers, Antonio Gibson, Chris Carson. Those are guys that I'd take beforehand. I know you're not worried about Darrell Henderson, but I am. I think Darrell Henderson's a good running back, and I think that he's going to carve out a role for himself. So, I just can't completely get behind seeing Cam Akers going in the top 15.
And I will say, though, I actually recently updated my rankings. I almost forgot. I actually have him as RB11. So I'm right there. I'm not quite top 10, but I'm RB11 just because, look, I just feel that, again, he had a slow start, for obvious reasons. But once he got the job, to me, we saw the way he was used, again, out of the backfield, on the goal line. I think he's going to be a touchdown machine. And I believe, he's going to be a PPR monster. I think, they're going to use Darrell Henderson, but I just don't think that he's going to be enough of a threat for me to be scared off from Cam Akers. I'm just excited about the whole Rams offense, to be honest.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I'm excited about the Rams offense. Something else completely off the topic of Cam Akers, but since we were talking about Matthew Stafford a little bit, I was just thinking about this. We know that Matthew Stafford has a good deep ball. We've seen it throughout his whole career. And the Rams went out and they signed Deshaun Jackson in free agency, and they drafted Tutu Atwell. So I think that's going to be a new fold, too, that we're going to see in this Rams offense this year is a deep ball, which we never really saw with Jared Goff. His dump offs to Robert Woods and dump offs to Cooper Kupp, and we never saw him really pushing the ball. So if they're able to kind of add that layer to the game, start opening up down the field, it could be even better for Cam Akers. So I understand the ceiling he's got there, but this is kind of a weird year because there's a lot of guys, like the top 20 running backs really all have really high ceilings, and Cam Akers kind of falls in there. And it's just, you gotta decide your risk tolerance, because I think that there's a little bit more risk baked in with Cam Akers than there are with some of those other guys. All right, let's move over to the next question. And this one, I don't really like any of these players, if I'm being honest, but let's just assume for the sake of, discussion here that this is PPR redraft, which is kind of taken over as like the standard form. So this guy is asking Mr. Undisputed Era, Raheem Mostert, James Conner, Corey Davis, or Henry Ruggs. I assume this is a draft question. Who are you taking if, these are your only four options?
It's funny. I actually got clarification from the guy after this, but I'll answer it as like a redraft. So as a redraft question, I'm going to go James Conner. I believe that James Conner is going, maybe that's surprising to some, but I believe James Conner is going to have a bigger role than we expected, right? So I think Chase Edmonds, I know there's a lot of Chase Edmonds truthers out there, but he wasn't really ever used as like a workhorse back, right? We've seen him, always be sharing with somebody else. Will he be the RB1 of the committee? I guess possibly, but I think they brought in James Conner for a reason. And yeah, they're not going to make James Conner a workhorse because obviously he hasn't been very healthy throughout his career. But I believe that James Conner is going to do better than expected. I was almost going to pick Raheem Mostert, but the problem is that they just have so many backs with the 49ers. I don't know if it's going to be Wayne Gallman. I don't know if it's going to be Trey Sermon. So to me, that's a little bit messier. So for redraft, I'll go James Conner.
All right. So I'll answer this question as, assuming redraft PPR as well. And then we can go through the clarification that you got on this one. But if, I'm looking at these four guys, the guy I want is actually Corey Davis. And the simple reason for that is I think that Corey Davis is going to have the opportunity to touch the ball more than any of these other guys. Raheem Mostert, we've seen it. He's flashed, but he's never gotten a huge chunk of the volume. It's just him ripping off these big plays that make for these game-winning weeks. And sure, that could happen, but you know that you're going to get a few weeks like that, and then you're going to get a few weeks of injury and a few weeks where he's not touching the ball as much. So he worries me. James Conner, I agree with everything that you said. I think that they brought him in for a reason, and I think that he's going to be heavily utilized, and I like him, but I think that Rondale Moore is going to be back there taking some snaps out of the backfield. I feel like Chase Edmonds is going to be an annoying side in the thorn. And then we've also got the injury history with James Conner. Henry Ruggs is a guy, we talked about the Raiders wide receiver room last time we were on this show together, and I talked about how I'm just not really too excited about any of the guys over there, any pass catchers outside of Darren Waller. But Corey Davis, he's actually in a position where he can be a wide receiver one. And I don't say a wide receiver one is in like a top 12 fantasy scoring, but he can be the wide receiver one on the Jets. There isn't a lot of competition over there. And Corey Davis, he's always been in the shadow of somebody during his time in Tennessee, but we know this guy can ball. We know he's got the body, the speed, just everything to take on that kind of alpha role in an offense. So I think of all of these guys, he's going to see the most opportunity, and it wouldn't shock me if we see Corey Davis see 110, 120 targets this season.
So one of the reasons I didn't go Corey Davis, and that's very true, but honestly, Crowder re-signing with the Jets is the main reason why I didn't go Corey Davis, right? So yes, Davis for me, I would have gone previously, but you have Davis, you have Crowder. Now you have Elijah Moore that's all of a sudden a superstar. And you still have Mims. So for me, it's not very clear cut that Corey Davis is going to be the guy. It's very possible, but Zach Wilson's favorite target might be Crowder. So that's the reason I went in. But in terms of the clarification, so he actually said that this was a startup draft for Dynasty.
Right.
So yeah, so this was
in that case, Henry Ruggs. Henry Ruggs
exactly.
all day for me then.
I said Henry Ruggs too. It was very, very easy. So
yeah.
But it was too easy if we went that way. So I'm glad we actually answered it as a redraft.
Yeah, if this is a dynasty startup, give me Henry Ruggs.
Yeah,
100 times out of 100. He had a disappointing rookie season, but you can't teach speed, and he was the fastest guy coming out of the draft last year. So yeah, I'd roll the dice on Ruggs. We just talked about this yesterday with Lauren Carpenter, actually on 2 Point Stance, and I said that I am just. My entire fantasy career, as long as I've been playing fantasy football, I just keep getting suckered into these fast guys. Jacoby Brissett, or I'm sorry, not Jacoby Brissett, Jacoby Ford, Darius Hayward-Bay. The Raiders, they draft these fast guys and they hardly ever pan out, but I'm still drafting them year 1, year 2, year 3, hoping that they can pan
the
out.
Raiders of fantasy football.
Exactly. So let's move on to the next one, because we had a story. I'm sure you heard about this, but Frank Clark was caught with a loaded gun in his car, a loaded automatic weapon, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But let's assume that he is unable to play for the sake of this question. How might Frank Clark's potential departure from the NFL affect the Chiefs' defense? What do you think, Troy?
So, it's Frank Clark. He's shown us that he's a key piece to that defense. So it's going to affect them. But at the same time, I think the Chiefs overall are going to be fine, even if Frank Clark, misses time or whatever the case may be. I don't want to speculate too much, but most of us are probably expecting he's going to be suspended or whatever the case may be. But it definitely affects them, right? Frank Clark, he played a big role for them, last year. So to me, I'm like, again, I'm more focused on the offense. I think they're still going to be high scoring. Maybe they might let the other team be a little bit more competitive if Frank Clark is not in the picture. But as a team, I'm not too worried. But it's definitely going to be a hit to the Chiefs defense.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head here. Even if this does negatively affect the Chiefs defense, which obviously losing a 28-year-old pass rusher like Frank Clark in his athletic prime would be a huge blow to the defense. But does it really matter? This team's still going to be putting up monster weeks on offense, so it'll hurt their pass rush. But what I want to talk about with this question a little bit is that I just don't think that it's going to really be that big of a problem. We have seen a lot of NFL players with illicit gun charges in the past not get anything more than a slap on the wrist. So sure, he might be suspended for a couple games or anything like that. But talking about a potential departure from the NFL, I think that's a little bit extreme. I think that we're going to see Frank Clark play. It's June. We got to have something to talk about, right? So some guy getting pulled over with some guns in the car. But realistically, I don't think that it's going to be that big of a deal, and we'll probably see him play. All right, on to the next question, and this one is from Shane Barrett over at the Fantasy Astronauts. Who is your dark horse rookie wide receiver? And what he said was, fifth rounder later or undrafted. That might be a little bit too deep. I couldn't really go that deep, but I want to hear who you got. Who's your dark horse wide receiver, Troy?
So if I had to go super deep, like he wanted Tamarian Terry, with Seattle, I think would be. I guess I don't believe that he's going to have a role, but if it was a dark horse question, if I'm going a little bit less deep, I guess, and this was tough. I will say, I don't know if Amari Rogers is considered deep enough, but he's not one of the, but he's not one of obviously he was not a first rounder. So to me, I'll go Amari Rogers. I think, he definitely has potential to be the second option in Green Bay. And, we've seen, the MVS experiment. We've seen just too much inconsistency, right? And it's just something where if it's not Adams, there's no one else that's going to be reliable for you. So to me, I think Amari Rogers definitely has an ability to slot in. Alan Lazard, he's a big receiver, but he's nothing special. So I think Amari Rogers has the ability to possibly surprise some people.
Yeah, man. People even before the draft were making comps to Randall Cobb when talking about Amari Rogers. So then for him to land in Green Bay, that was just, got everybody all hot and bothered thinking that we could see, Randall Cobb 2.0 in this Packers offense. So I'm with you, man. Amari Rogers is one of the few rookie wide receivers that I'm targeting, especially in redraft. Rookie wide receivers aren't something I get too excited about. And last year we saw Brandon Ayuk and Justin Jefferson and some of these guys pop off. But really, like when in redraft, there's only 4 rookie wide receivers that I really care about this year. And that's Jamar Chase and Rashad Bateman. No big surprise there. Amari Rogers, who you just talked about. And then I'm not going to go super deep. I don't want to sit here and talk about like Josh Immature BB carving out a role for himself in Jacksonville. But, I guess the dark horse out of the 4 guys that I'm looking at would be Nico Collins. And it's not that he's like a super, super deep pull, but I like him, man. He's 6'4". He's fast. He's got a huge catch radius. And realistically, he could end up being the wide receiver 1 on this team. He doesn't have a lot of competition for targets. Brandon Cooks is there. But I think that if Deshaun Watson doesn't play, I think that just helps Nico Collins out a little bit more because Davis Mills, Tyrod Taylor, they're not guys that I expect to be taking deep shots down the field like we see Deshaun Watson do with Brandon Cooks. They're going to be looking for the big target, and the big target is going to be Nico Collins. So he's somebody that realistically, if we see Davis Mills or Tyrod Taylor starting this year in Houston, I could see Nico Collins ending up as the wide receiver 1 on that team. So I guess that would be my dark horse, but like, is it really that dark of a horse? He was a late 3rd round pick.
Yeah, I'll go a little bit, 1 round later. I'll say Tylan Wallace. Wallace, he's now with the Ravens. And there was consideration, before he got injured that he could have been, like a first rounder, 2nd round wide receiver. And, obviously his injury definitely affected him. So I think that's one of the reasons why he fell in drafts. But now it seems like he's healthy. He's ready to go. And with the Ravens, we already know that they don't have a lot of depth in the wide receiver position. So we know Rashad Bateman is most likely going to emerge as the wide receiver 1 on the team. They have Marquis Brown. We've seen Marquis Brown. I think he's going to actually benefit in terms of, because he's not a real 1. So I think It's maybe going to help him if he's not going to be treated like a 1. We know that Mark Andrews has always been the main target, but in terms of wide receivers, they haven't had much. Again, they had they had Des Bryant, Willie Snead last year. So having Tylan Wallace and Rashad Bateman, even though they're rookies, I believe that they both can be talented enough where they can possibly emerge. Tylan Wallace maybe emerge as the 3rd option on the team, but I'm excited for him. I think, they have Sammy Watkins too, but long term, I'm not too concerned about Sammy Watkins.
I see a little bit of Cam Newton in Lamar Jackson, and just in the aspect that he likes those big receivers. And like we saw that with Cam Newton. Steve Smith was obviously the outlier, but he's a Hall of Famer. He's an outlier in every sense of the word, height, everything. But we saw him like Kelvin Benjamin, and we saw him like Greg Olsen. We saw him like these bigger targets, and we see the same thing with Lamar Jackson. And he'll take his shots at Marquis Brown, but Mark Andrews was the one that led the team in targets. So I think that they realize that too, is giving him some big guys that can catch balls across the middle. That's why they got Tylan Wallace, Rashad Bateman, and even brought in Sammy Watkins. And I felt like that has been the missing piece to this Baltimore Ravens offense. And when Kenny Golladay was a free agent, I wanted them to get him. When Allen Robinson, before they had franchise tagged him, I thought Allen Robinson would have been a perfect match in Baltimore. Even Julio Jones, when he was on the trade market, I was like, Baltimore, like pick up the phone and make it happen. I feel like that's exactly what this team needs. And you already hit it on the head that I think bringing in one of these guys that can kind of take on the alpha role is just going to help Marquis Brown, because Marquis Brown is not built to be a wide receiver 1. But I think that if you could take the pressure off him with somebody like Tylan Wallace or Rashad Bateman, it's just going to help Marquis Brown even that much more.
Absolutely.
So we got an interesting question here, and I say interesting because I immediately went with my gut and my rankings and knew who I was picking, but then I started looking at the Footballguys staff rankings, and we'll dive into it a little bit. But this one's from Jeff Greenwood with the Fantasy Footballers, and he is asking who scores more points this season, Chris Godwin or Mike Evans. Take us away, Troy.
I have Mike Evans. Ranked higher. I think I have them pretty much back to back. I have Mike Evans currently ranked at wide receiver 7. Actually, nope, I lied. I actually currently have Chris Godwin ranked higher, but I'm probably going to change my mind. So yeah, so I was surprised by that, but I was thinking more about it because I'm thinking about more touchdown upside. And I think that, Mike Evans to me has that. So last year, we saw for some reason Mike Evans was being treated like a streaming tight end for parts of last year, right? He had, like 2 catches for 2 touchdowns, right? So he seems to be Brady's go-to guy in the end zone. So I think from that perspective, Mike Evans, but I think that Chris Godwin, he was dealing with some injuries, but I think he's going to have a bounce back season. So I'm probably going to change my rankings, and I'm probably going to put Mike Evans ahead. I'm surprised, but yeah, I think Mike Evans outscores Chris Godwin.
All right, and we'll disagree on this one because I think that Chris Godwin is going to outscore Mike Evans, but it's such a tough one to pick, and I've got them at 11 and 13 in my rankings. Chris Godwin at 11, Mike Evans at 13. So I've got them very, very, very close. So I want to just dive into this a little bit because when I was looking at both of these guys and how they're ranked, what it seems to be is Mike Evans is a guy that is very polarizing. We've got Matt Waldman, one of the sharpest rankers out there, has Mike Evans at wide receiver 3, third overall. And then we've got Ryan Weiss has him all the way down at wide receiver 27. So you see this huge disparity in how the Footballguys staff is ranking Mike Evans, as high as 3 and as low as 27. And then when you look at Chris Godwin, it's a lot different. I'm higher than anybody else on the staff. I've got him at wide receiver 11. Nobody has him higher than that. But a couple of guys have him ranked as low as wide receiver 22. So overall, he's just a hair lower, but it seems like his standard deviation and his range of outcomes is much tighter because I think people know what you're going to get with Chris Godwin. He's going to see a hefty share of targets. He's going to rack up yards. But, you hit the nail on the head that Mike Evans seems to be Tom Brady's guy in the end zone. Like once they get to the goal line, he's looking Mike Evans's way. So he's going to be a little bit more boom or bust, I think. But really, man, this whole Bucs team is going to be so polarizing because you've got Rob Gronkowski coming back. You've got these deep guys like Jalen Darden and Scotty Miller and that have shown success. But then you've also got Antonio Brown, which a lot of people are sleeping on. And when you're looking at ADP, when you're doing best ball drafts, when you're seeing how these drafts are shaking out right now, everybody seems to have forgotten about Antonio Brown. The same Antonio Brown that had 6 consecutive seasons finishing as the wide receiver 3 or better. And through the 11 games that these 3 guys, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and Antonio Brown, through the 11 games that they played together last year, Antonio Brown saw 76 targets. Chris Godwin saw 77 targets, and Mike Evans saw 78 targets. That is 1, 2, 3. I mean, they couldn't be closer. Like these guys are going to get peppered with targets, and out of them, it's tough to pick between Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, but what I want to call out is that getting drafted in the 8th and 9th round right now is Antonio Brown, who should be in the same conversation as Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and he could be had for an 8th and a 9th round pick rather than a 2nd or a 3rd. So I think last year, though, Godwin, he had that finger injury, and I think that kind of hampered his season just a little bit, but we talked about it before the season that, Chris Godwin is just like Tom Brady's prototypical receiver. That's what he likes, is a big guy that can run crisp routes and get open. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Godwin supplant Mike Evans as the team's wide receiver 1 this year. So I'm going with Godwin on this one.
And it's funny how and I feel like PPR, I think it's definitely more of an argument and closer. I think if you don't, for the few people that don't play PPR, I think it's easily Evans. I mean, just because, again, kind of my argument about the touchdown, but to cater to the majority of people with PPR, I guess your argument, but I'm still going to go Mike Evans.
All right. And you know what? It's one of those where it's going to be so close that we'll find out at the end of the year. And realistically, I think they're all going to get targeted similarly. So it's going to be who can come down with the most touchdowns. That's probably going to be the difference maker between these two guys. All right. We got a question from our buddy Abe, DFS_docket on Twitter. Would you rather draft a top 3 quarterback in the 3rd round or a top 3 tight end in the 3rd round? What would you do, Troy?
That's pretty easy for me. Tight end. Easy. Mm-hmm. You know what? Because quarterback is much, much deeper. It's not, to me, it's not even close, right? Tight end is the most shallow position in all of fantasy football. Quarterback, again, would it be nice to have a Patrick Mahomes? Of course it's going to be nice to have Patrick Mahomes. If you could possibly, stack like a Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, maybe at that point, because you're going to have to take Kelce in the 1st round, right? So if you want to do that, cool. That's probably the perfect scenario. But overall, I would say that I'm definitely rather have a Travis Kelce, a Darren Waller, or a Kittle versus, a Patrick Mahomes there because, again, you can get a Josh Allen, in the 7th, 8th round, much later than that. And he could probably outscore Patrick Mahomes if we're being honest, right? So for me, this was pretty straightforward tight end.
So the reason I wanted to highlight this question specifically, and I thought about asking Gabe, like, hey, do you want to rephrase this question a little bit? I just want to show, because I've done a lot of best ball drafts, I've done a few redraft drafts as well, and if you're hoping to get a top 3 tight end in the 3rd round, you're not going to get a top 3 tight end. So that's kind of what I want to point out right here is these guys are gone by the mid-second. Almost every single draft I've done, you see Travis Kelce go at the end of the 1st. You see Darren Waller and George Kittle go in the front half of the 2nd round. So if you're trying to strategize in your redraft league this year, I'm going to get 2 running backs and then I'm going to take a tight end in round 3. It's not going to happen. It's not. Like, everybody realizes how steep the fall off is after that big 3 this year. So if you want to wait until the 3rd round to get yourself a tight end, that's great. But I hope you're happy with Mark Andrews or Kyle Pitts or one of those other guys, because the big 3 will not be there. In the same vein, I typically see Patrick Mahomes go in the 4th round. So you can wait a little bit longer on quarterback. You can get yourself a Pat Mahomes, a Dak Prescott, a Lamar Jackson, one of those guys in the 4th or 5th round. So I just kind of want to highlight what I have seen so far in the drafts that I'm doing this offseason. And if you want one of those guys, if you want Travis Kelce, if you want Darren Waller, if you want George Kittle, you better pony up at least a top 20 pick, because they're not making it past that.
No, I mean, it's very true. But and I think I got Kittle late second. So he could. It's possible that they may fall late second, but I think 3rd round is being very optimistic, like you said.
Yeah, and that's something else that I've noticed is that Darren Waller has basically surpassed Kittle in ADP almost everywhere that I've seen. 2 months ago it was Kelce, Kittle, and then Waller, and now Waller has taken over, and he's the guy going before Kittle in the majority of the drafts that I'm seeing. So he is starting to slide a little bit. You might be able to get him late second, but I have yet to see George Kittle drop into the 3rd round. But something I want to talk about, we know that there are a lot of fantasy football platforms out there, and sometimes it's hard to choose which one you should be playing on. So what I want to point out is that not all of these platforms offer customizable tools. Some leagues have limits on actions that you can and can't do, and not all of them give you the power to be creative and have control over the type of league that you want to be in. Well, guess what? There is a platform that is going to make life so much easier for you and give you all of the creative freedom that you want, and that app is Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry. It is free to play and manage your fantasy football league. Whether you're into redraft, keeper, dynasty, best ball, just about anything, you can design the league to see how you see fit. And Troy, we haven't even announced this yet. This is a, June 23rd Mailbag Show exclusive, but we're going to be offering a promotion through Fantrax this year where it is going to be a free roll. That's right. You don't have to pay a penny. All you have to do is go on Fantrax and you'll get to play in a best ball league. Doesn't cost you a penny. You get to play against me. You're going to get to play against Troy. You're going to get to play against Joe Bryant and Sigmund Bloom. The whole Football Guys staff is going to be there, and the winner of this tournament is going to get $1,000. So we will be sending out links for that shortly. If you haven't already signed up for the newsletter, be sure to do that. We are going to be having this Beat the Football Guys Best Ball Tournament through Fantrax, so be sure to sign up. Like I said, you've got a lot of platforms to choose from, but you should choose Fantrax for the customizable features, and we will have that promotion going on that we'll be sending out in just a little bit. All right, let's get back to some of the questions. We've got a question from Taco here, which, if anybody's watched the league, what a great name to submit this. I don't know if your name's actually Taco or not, but we're going to roll with it. And Taco is saying that I have heard both positive and regressive outlooks on Justin Herbert's 2021 season. What are his floor and ceilings for this year?
For me, so I'll take this, right? So,
all right.
I don't think he does. His floor, I feel, is still really high. So here's the thing. I think that he's only going to get better, and that's kind of scary. So right now, what do I have? I have Justin Herbert currently ranked as my QB7. So that's probably going to be, closer to his ceiling. But I feel like his floor is high QB2. And again, that's like being generous. I don't think he's going to finish as a QB2. I think he's going to finish as a QB1. I know that they have a different coach and everything, but Justin Herbert, he rocked his rookie year. And even if there's might be some regression in some areas, I just think he's only going to get better. I think the hype is extremely warranted. You have Keenan Allen there. I know you have Josh Palmer now. You still have Mike Williams. So I think there's a lot to be excited about. And, they have a healthy Austin Eckler, hopefully throughout the whole season. So he's going to help contribute to Justin Herbert's fantasy success. So, yeah, I think he's a locked-in QB1, but worst high-end QB2.
Yeah, I'll agree with that for the most part. And this is one where just the way the questions were coming in this week, it's all the guys that I'm just higher on than anybody else. And I am higher on Justin Herbert than all the rest of the Football Guys staff. Just like somebody, who was it earlier that we were just talking about that I was higher on than anybody else? Chris Godwin, right. And Justin Herbert, I am also higher on than anybody else. I have him as QB6. And the reason for that ranking, he was QB7 last year. In his rookie year, when his first start, he didn't even know he was going to get played, or he was going to be playing until an hour before the game. And if you look at for QBs that missed one or fewer games, which obviously Justin Herbert only missed week 1 when he wasn't the starter, he finished as the QB7. So I think that's pretty much his floor. Like I don't expect to see him regress. I mean, he's a great quarterback. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, and he is an absolute laser of an arm. The one thing that I'd call out, though, specifically is that he didn't really rush when Austin Eckler was healthy last year. So he's got the rushing upside, but he also likes to check down. And last year, Austin Eckler on a per game basis actually had more targets than he ever had with Phillip Rivers. So people are sitting here saying that, Phillip Rivers is the reason Austin Eckler was able to get all these targets and garner all this work in the passing game. But Justin Herbert actually utilized him more in the passing game than Phillip Rivers ever did. So I think that's the one thing that kind of puts a cap on his ceiling, is that he's not going to be rushing the ball a lot, rather than tucking the ball and running like we're so used to seeing Lamar Jackson and some of these other guys do, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen. I think that we're more likely to see him just check down to Austin Eckler. But, realistically, I think this is going to be a powerhouse offense once again. We saw what a great player Justin Herbert is last year. So I'd be shocked to see him, finish anywhere below QB7. I think that, he's a high-end QB1 in all formats and should be treated as such.
Absolutely. Again, like no one was expecting him to do what he did last year. I think if people are expecting regression, for the most part, maybe he won't win, MVP or anything, but it's just, again, I think it's hard to make an argument that he's not going to be a QB1.
Yeah, and that's the thing it would be shocking to see him finish outside of that top 12 and not be a QB1 this year. Before we get on to the next question, I just want to remind you that if you're watching the show, please drop your comments in the chat and we will get to them at the end. We go through as many questions as we can. So far, we've been able to get to all of them. Haven't had a single show where we've run out of time yet, and we want to hope to keep that going this week. So drop those questions in the chat and we will get to them. We just have a few left of the submitted questions to get through beforehand. And this one comes from Twitter as well, at For Whom J Bell Tolls. And obviously, Troy, you're a Dolphins fan. I'm a Bears fan. We're going to get at least one question about the Dolphins and Bears every single week. And this one, is Brandon Marshall the best player to play for the Dolphins and the Bears? Or is it Jay Cutler? Or is it Adewale Ogunleye? Is it somebody else? I don't know if it's somebody else. I think that he hit all of them right there. But who would you say is the best of these three guys that shared teams?
If when shared teams, it has to be Brandon Marshall.
Yeah,
I feel like it's not close. Jay Cutler, we had Jay Cutler when we took him out of retirement for God knows what reason. It was like the worst decision ever. Like that was a waste of a season. I was like, it was a joke. I was like, are you kidding me right now? So that's absolutely not. It had to be somewhat even, right? If he was productive as a Dolphin, he was productive with the Bears. So I think this question goes to Brandon Marshall. And he's a UCF alum. Shout out UCF.
Yeah, man. I mean, the Brandon Marshall and Jay Cutler are probably my two favorite Bears of all time. And anybody that follows me on Twitter at Dave Kluge sees in my bio that I have Jay Cutler apologist in my bio. And like, I'm a huge Jay Cutler fan, but let's be honest here. Brandon Marshall is one of the best receivers of all time. I don't think that any of these other guys come close. Adewale Ogunleye, he was an absolute blast to watch. You know, we got him during his prime when the Bears just had a dominant defense. Absolute blast. But yeah, Brandon Marshall is just, 5 tiers above where any of these other guys are ever going to go down in the annals of NFL history. So let's move on to the next one. And this one's from our good friend Amar, who I believe you and I have both done shows with in the past, writer over at RotoViz. And he says, which running back for the 2021 class is the most valuable dynasty asset? I have a feeling we're going to agree on this one, Troy. Who do you think?
Naji. I think it's Naji Harris. I mean, it's just, look, he is one of the very few running backs in the NFL who is stepping into a situation where he's going to be a workhorse. The workhorse running back is a dying breed, right? Where the NFL's full of committees. Naji isn't one of them. His competition, everybody behind him is not going to take anything. Anthony McFarland experiment, no. Again, maybe they might get 3 snaps a game, maybe, but Naji is the only knock that you can have on Naji at the moment is maybe the offensive line. They'll eventually get better. Again, he's going to be the running back for the foreseeable future for the Steelers. To me, it has to be Naji.
Yeah, come on, Amar. You got to give us a better question than this. I don't think there's anybody that's going to say anybody except Naji Harris. First running back drafted in the draft. Went to a team that is just going to feed him the ball, which we've seen them do with James Conner, even when he wasn't that good. James Conner wasn't effective with the touches he was getting, and they were still feeding him the ball. We saw what Le'Veon Bell did, a talented running back on that team just a few years ago. So Naji Harris, I think that he's going to be utilized in the passing game. He's going to get the goal line work. Like he's I think I forget who it was. It was a Pittsburgh beat reporter just a few weeks ago said that he expects Naji Harris to get at least 275 touches as a rookie, which is an extremely high bar. I don't think that any other rookie running back is going to come close to that. For the sake of conversation, Javonte Williams, he's somebody that I'm getting pretty excited about. Travis Etienne, he's going to be a solid pass catcher and valuable in PPR. Trey Sermon, everybody's fallen in love with him. He can do something in San Francisco. But I think Javonte Williams might even be my number 2 at this point behind Naji Harris. But Naji Harris is in a tier of his own before the NFL draft. And then after he was selected by the Pittsburgh Steelers, where they, just basically made it known that he was going to be the workhorse there, it just pushed him up even another tier up. So yeah, Naji Harris, don't overthink this one.
Yeah, and I'll just say quickly about the other one. So next year, Javonte, right? Everyone's hoping that he ends up being like, he's going to be the guy, but they probably will bring somebody in to back him up. I guess it depends on whoever. If it's going to be the same offensive coordinator, same system, but I just don't see how any of these guys are going to, outdo Naji.
Yeah, whether it be redraft or dynasty, Naji is the guy. All right, we got a question from Mike here, and Mike is a writer for the New York Jets, and he said the fantasy community seems to think that the pay cut for Jameson Crowder hurts the value of Elijah Moore. What say you, Troy?
Absolutely, it does. I mean, it hurts the value for him at least this year. There's, everyone just assuming that, and me included, Crowder was going to get cut. Elijah Moore was going to be in the slot or, use him on the outside, whatever. It's just one less person to take targets away from Elijah Moore. And there was a lot, especially the hype was almost, out of control for a little bit for Elijah. And then the Crowder pay cut happen. And for me, I'm just like, you know what? It hurts. It definitely hurts. I think that Crowder's going to, again, he's going to be on the field more. He's the veteran. I think Elijah Moore gets worked in, but I don't see how it can't be a negative. I mean, dynasty-wise, Elijah Moore is fine, but at least for this year, and who knows, next year, it's definitely going to hurt more.
Yeah, because I think that had Jameson Crowder not taken that pay cut, they would have just outright cut him. And then Elijah Moore would have walked into this scenario where he could have been the number 2, number 3 receiver on the team. But yeah, now that Jameson Crowder took that pay cut. And another thing is, I got to look this up really quickly, is Jameson Crowder's age, because it surprises me every single time. I want to say he's 28 years old. Yeah, he's 28 years old. People act like this man is 35 years old. Yeah, it feels like he's been in the league for a long, long time, but he's the same age as Allen Robinson and DeAndre Hopkins and a lot of these guys that are still elite wide receivers. And Jameson Crowder, he's, struggled with quarterback play throughout his entire career, but he's a very, very good, capable wide receiver. So I think that, I really wanted. I was actually on Twitter. I was out there with hashtag free Jameson Crowder. I was trying to start a movement to get this man out of the Jets so we can finally see what he could do with a competent quarterback. But unfortunately, he is staying there. He's the veteran, and I think that, this really limits Elijah Moore's upside, playing time, target share, just about every opportunity metric that you can put out there. This hurts him. So I'm going to agree with the fantasy community, apparently, on this one, according to what Michael says, and say that it does hurt his value. Moving on to the next question, we've got from Twitter, @thefantasyeng. Would you rather win a fantasy championship in your main league every year for the next 10 years straight, or your team wins a Super Bowl next season? Troy, what are you doing? 10 straight championships or a Dolphins Super Bowl this year?
I would have to go 10 straight championships because that means I'm making some money. So I'm going to do that. Look, I love my Dolphins, but the Dolphins help my fandom, but it doesn't help my pocket. So give me the 10 straight seasons.
See, I'm gonna differ here, man. I think we're just built a little different in Chicago. We bleed blue and orange up there in Chicago, and I was born a Bears fan. You guys can all see the signed Jay Cutler helmet right behind my head here. I wasn't alive in 1985. I was there in 2007 when they had that tough loss to the Colts, and that still haunts me. That's something I'm never gonna forget. It has been a very tumultuous relationship that I've had with the Bears franchise. And realistically, do I expect a rookie in Justin Fields or a veteran Andy Dalton to take them to the Super Bowl? No, of course not. But they went to a Super Bowl with Rex Grossman, and they still have a pretty solid defense. So, as fun as it would be to win my home league 10 straight years, that might get boring after a little while. Then you start getting spoiled and start acting like a Patriots fan that just has had all this nonstop taste of success. So give me one Super Bowl. That's what I want. Give me the one Super Bowl. But these questions
it said next season. We could win the Super Bowl after that. That's one of my caveats. So I was looking around the question. I'm like, I want my Dolphins to win. It doesn't have to be next season. If I'm winning 10 years in a row in my main league, I'll take the sacrifice and I could wait just a little longer.
Yeah, but what if the Dolphins take that, Cleveland Browns approach, and you're sitting there at 60-something years with no Super Bowl? Yeah, I'm going to take the one when I can get it. If I can get a guaranteed Super Bowl, give me the guaranteed Super Bowl because I'm 31 years old and I'm sick of waiting. All right,
I was going to say the Dolphins still have the undefeated season, so I always have that. Hopefully,
man, I'm going to throw this question to you first, Troy. By this time, anyone that's watched this show week in and week out has probably gotten to know @Daddy'sHomeFF a little bit. Our buddy Mike, he's one of our buddies out on Twitter, and he throws some wild questions out there. So, Troy, which NFL player do you think gives the best hug?
Ooh, who's the baddest?
Yeah, but I immediately thought Vince Wilfork, but he's not in the league anymore.
I'll say Snacks Harrison. I don't know how big he is, but with a name like Snacks, you gotta give good hugs. So I'll say Snacks Harrison.
I was going Vince Wilfork. I don't even know who's the heaviest guy in the league at this point.
Oh, someone do some research for us. I'm very curious. I have not researched this. I apologize, all the viewers and listeners. We did not look who the heaviest player was, but give me Snacks.
So I'll stick with the hometown here. Akeem Hicks. That dude is just a monster, big old beard, big old belly. I'm sure he could just pick me up off the ground. I'm sure Akeem Hicks gives great hugs. All right. And now, again, be sure to drop your questions in the chat because we have one more question, and then we are going to go to the chat and answer all of your questions live. But to wrap this up, we've got Jordan Vanek asking, what's your hot take that you personally have that you 100% believe in? If you've got a hot take and you don't believe in it, you shouldn't be telling it. So what's the hot take that you believe in, Troy? I know you got a few of them.
I try not to have too many hot takes, right? I try to be concise, but I think that Rashad Bateman is going to be eventually, it's not that hot, man, because I'm like, I wish I could have the confidence to say Rashad Bateman is going to be a wide receiver one in fantasy this year. I'm not crazy, so I'm not going to do that to y'all. But I think that he's going to be, I'll say he'll be a top 15 dynasty wide receiver within the next 2 years. I'll say that.
I like that one. That's a good one. And, I feel like my biggest hot take from the offseason isn't really so hot anymore. If you were looking at redraft rankings, 3 months ago, people were putting Lamar Jackson in the QB7, QB8 area. And I've had Lamar Jackson as my QB1 for a long time. But now he's starting to get pushed up, and everyone's got him at that 3, 4, 5 spot. So I don't even know how hot that is anymore. But, I guess that would be one of mine. Another hot take I have, I guess, though, there's a lot of question marks surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers and the wide receiver core that they have there in Pittsburgh and who the guy's going to be. And my guy that I've got ranked above everybody is Chase Claypool. I'm expecting a DK Metcalf style breakout for Chase Claypool this year. And I know, that's a very basic comp when you look at their size and speed and all of that. But, I think he's got all the potential to have an absolutely massive breakout this year. So that's mine is, I'm much higher on Chase Claypool than anybody else on the Football Guys staff. And I think that he is going to be the best fantasy asset out of Pittsburgh this year. All right.
Before we go, I'll add one more thing. Well, two more things. So I did come out with an article about Chubb being top 5 this year. I don't know if that's much of a hot take, but I say Chubb could be the top 5. Yes, even in PPR. And I would have an article coming out about how DeAndre Hopkins could be wide receiver 1 overall this year. So I'll say those. Maybe those are. Here's the thing. I feel like those aren't super hot takey because I think those are within the realm of possibility. But I'll say those.
So what I'll say is like that whole top 8 wide receivers, when you're looking at who the top 8 wide receivers are, you could make a case for any of those guys to be the wide receiver 1 if we're being realistic. Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Brown, Calvin Ridley, Michael Thomas, Justin Jefferson. Any of those guys could finish as the wide receiver 1. But I can give you a little tidbit that you should use when you're writing this article on DeAndre Hopkins, and that is that before Kyler Murray injured his shoulder, guess who the wide receiver 1 was last year? That's right. It was DeAndre Hopkins.
And Kyler Murray was QB1. I actually do have that. He was QB1 before he injured his shoulder. So I actually do have that, man. You telling all the people my secret. I'm playing.
Be sure to check out, man. Football Guys has been killing it with the articles lately. We're doing these spotlight articles where each of us just highlights on one specific guy. I did a Lamar Jackson one a couple weeks ago. I had an AJ Brown one that just released yesterday. I'm working on a Joe Mixon piece right now. But we got Matt Waldman doing these. We got Sigmund Bloom doing them. Jeff Hasley. Everybody's cranking out these spotlights right now. So be sure to check those out because they give you a really deep dive on a player. We talk about projections, rankings, past history. There's so much that goes into these. So be sure to check out those Football Guys spotlights on footballguys.com. Anyway, we've got about 10 minutes left, so let's try to wrap up with some of the chat questions here. We got Diego Lopez in the chat asking us, you have Odell on your Dynasty team. I offered Debo. What more do I have to add to get the deal done? So you following that one, Troy?
You shouldn't have to. Yeah. So pretty much you have Odell. You have Odell on your Dynasty team. I offered Debo. What more do I have to do to get the deal done? So wait.
So he's saying you got Odell here, you got Debo here. He's saying that you need to add a little bit more on the Debo side to get it done.
Got it.
Which I don't agree with. I think that Debo and Odell are kind of similar right now in Dynasty.
Nah, I think you got to add a little bit to the Debo side. I think if you added a late second, early third, I think that's fair. Because to me, Odell, I think, is being disrespected because he was injured, right? If Odell's one of the best wide receivers in the league still. I think the only issue is that, again, people forgot about him because he's been hurt for a while. But if he balls out, he has the ability to finish as – it's hard to make an argument for a wide receiver 1 because he hasn't been a wide receiver 1 in a very long time. But we know he has the talent to do it. He's a better wide receiver than Debo. So I think late second, early third might get the deal done. But I still like the Odell side. I guess maybe I'm more of a truther. I'm more higher on him.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit higher on Debo than the consensus, so I get it. I mean, realistically, if I had Odell and somebody offered Debo, I would just accept it right there. Give me the younger guy that, I just, Debo struggled with injuries, but I'm a big fan of Debo, and I like what they do with him. They draw up plays to get him the ball in space, so I would just do that straight up. And if somebody threw in a late second or an early third, like you're saying, that's a cherry on top, and I'd take that too. So we got another question here, and I don't even know if this is really like a question, but we got Bo McBigtime. I'm thinking this might have been a comment when we were talking about Raheem Mostert a little bit, but why do people like Trey Sermon? I don't get it. Can you answer this one? Do you like Trey Sermon, Troy?
I think he's fine. I think I have a realistic value on Trey Sermon. I'm not super hype on him, but I'm not super low on him, right? I'm very in the middle because I think Raheem Mostert is going to be the RB1 going into the season. I wouldn't be surprised if Trey Sermon ends up being the RB1 for them by the end of the season. There's a reason why they took him in the draft. We also know that Mostert struggles with injuries. So Sermon's going to have it's a good chance that he's going to have the opportunity to show what he's got. But you also got, Wayne Gallman in the mix, right? We saw what he did in relief of, Barkley being injured last year. He's no slouch. So I think that Trey Sermon's fine. And I think some people who are taking him like late first of your rookie drafts, I think that's a little bit hot. Yeah, I wasn't doing that, right? I got him. I think late second, early third was a fair. I say late second, like rookie pick was a fair place to take Sermon. I think it's going to take a little bit for him to command that job. I don't think it's just going to be given to him. So that's my only hesitation. I think he's fine, but he's firmly behind like guys like, Javonte Williams, ETN, Naji, guys like that.
Yeah, I think that I think you already called it out, but the 49ers trading up for him shows that that's somebody that they really, really did desire. And then I think another thing is that you're just seeing this kind of seismic change right now in the backfield. They got rid of Matt Breida. They got rid of Tevin Coleman. Some people are speculating that Raheem Mostert could even be a camp cut. I don't think it's going to happen, but, it could happen. But I think that what they're trying to do is just get dramatically younger in that backfield. By shipping those guys off, they brought in Wayne Gallman, who's just 26 years old. They went out and drafted Elijah Mitchell, and they drafted Trey Sermon. So I think that, what people get excited about is we know that there's going to be a guy in this backfield. We've seen all sorts of guys, whether it be Jerick McKinnon or Matt Breida or JaMychal Hasty or Jeff Wilson Jr., Raheem Mostert. You see all of these guys have huge weeks occasionally. So I think that people like Sermon because he's a relatively cheap option that is going to have those week-winning weeks. So, I don't think that he's going to run away and suddenly see 250 carries in a year because that's just not how Kyle Shanahan operates. But I think that he's going to have some really, really good weeks when the chips fall into place. So I like it. All right, let's move to the next question. We got Peter asking us this question from Periscope. Thoughts on how productive Kadarius Toney will be in his rookie year? When would you draft him in fantasy?
So I feel like I'm not super excited about him in redraft. So I think best ball, he's going like the 10th, 11th round in like best ball drafts right now. So the problem is that we don't know how he's going to be used, but at the same time, it's the draft capital argument, right? They took him in the first round. He's an explosive player. He can be used, in so many places on the field. So I'm a lot more excited about him in Dynasty than I am in, redraft this particular year. I would say, where do you draft him in fantasy? So yeah, if we're talking like redraft, he's somebody you're drafting late. You're drafting again, 10th, 11th round, that particular range, if you want to take a shot on him. But in Dynasty, obviously, he holds a lot more value. He's a young guy, first round draft pick. So he's going to go a little bit earlier there. But yeah, don't spend too much draft capital for redraft this year just because his role's unpredictable. And we just don't know how he's going to be used yet.
Yeah, I feel like I called it out earlier. Like, there's a lot of rookies that I just don't want anything to do with. Like, if Rondale Moore, Kadarius Toney, some of these other guys, like if they really, really drop to like the 12th round, maybe I'll take a chance on them. But Kadarius Toney's just not somebody I'm getting too excited about this year. I think them going out and splashing all that money. What was it, $80 million that they gave Kenny Galladay? I think that Kenny Galladay is going to be the guy here, and I think that Toney is just going to be lucky to get the scraps left over. So I'm not really too excited about Kadarius Toney this year. I think that he's probably going to, put up 600-700 yards, and that'll be about it. Maybe a handful of touchdowns in there, but he's not somebody that I'm really going out and targeting in redraft at all. All right, we got another one here from Jay Arsh. God, I can't remember where Jay works. He's at a few different websites right now, but a friend of the show. We see him in the chat every single week, and he's saying in Dynasty, would you rather have Tua or would you rather have Jalen Hurts? What about you, Troy?
This question. Okay, so I would say in Dynasty, give me Hurts.
Oh,
give me Hurts. And
really?
I'm very conflicted with that answer, right? Because I think it all depends on how they do this year. And that's the thing. Like, this year is so important in Dynasty. I think that Tua has maybe a little bit of longer leash because he is a first round draft pick. So let's say he does decently. this year, and he most likely is going to be starting next year. And what I've been on record saying is that I believe that Tua is going to be a better real life quarterback than a fantasy quarterback. Hurts is pretty much exactly what we want in a fantasy quarterback, right? Tua doesn't provide the same rushing upside as Hurts does. So based off of that, we don't have that many elite rushing quarterbacks, in the pool. We have some guys who are mobile, but you don't have guys like Lamar Jackson's or Kyler Murray. And Jalen Hurts, to me, has the upside to do it. If he performs well this year and they commit to him, he could easily be a first-round pick in Dynasty going forward. And it's very, very dependent on this year. Tua, and I always comp Tua, I think he's more like a Kirk Cousins type. I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to be very accurate, but I think his upside is limited. He's not the type of quarterback that's going to go out there and throw for 300 yards and like 4 touchdowns. He doesn't have that upside. Could he finish as a QB1 some weeks? Yeah. I feel like most QBs have that ability, but I have to be honest, and I'm going to go Hurts.
Oh man, and I'm actually going to disagree with you on this one, and I'm going to take your boy Tua. Yeah, okay. And like I'm kind of a Tua hater, I guess, when it comes to fantasy. But the way that I look at it, I assume if it's Dynasty, it's probably a super flex league, and I don't think that Tua is going to ever really be a QB1. But I think that he's going to do enough to win games and hold on to a starting job for 4 or 5 years, something like that. Where Jalen Hurts obviously has a much higher ceiling, but it worries me because, he doesn't have that draft capital tied to him. He doesn't have the hype surrounding him. He doesn't have a fan base that really is getting behind him the same way that everyone's getting around Tua. So my fear is that Jalen Hurts goes out this year and he could be a guy that, could finish as a low-end QB1 in fantasy and then not play again next year as the starter because, he could be running for his life and playing hero ball and racking up garbage time. And, he could be a QB1, but they could still be a 2, 3, 4 win team. Where I think Tua, he might not put up those gaudy fantasy numbers, but I think that Miami has a very strong foundation right now. And I don't think that Tua is going to hold them back from winning. I think they're going to be, consistently in or near the playoffs for the next few years. So I just think that the solid foundation surrounding Tua makes him a little bit more desirable in fantasy. But if you're in a total rebuild right now and you want to swing for the fences, then I think you go out and get Hurts because he has a much higher ceiling. And, worst case scenario, he goes off this year and you don't want to keep him long term. You could probably flip him for, decent draft capital or other players. But I think that if you're just looking for a consistent guy in Dynasty for the next few years, I think Tua is the guy.
No, it's completely fair.
All right. Well, we are out of time here, and this is the first time that we didn't get a chance to get to all of the questions. So if you're watching next week, try to drop those questions early because I start from the top and work my way down, but we will try to get to all of them next week. But anyway, I want to thank you so much for tuning into Football Guys' newest show, the Mailbag Show with myself, Dave Kluge. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. Troy, let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter as well.
Sure. You can find me at T-King Mode on Twitter.
Yep. And you can find us live every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Periscope and on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to the Football Guys YouTube page at youtube.com/footballguystv, where you can find all the rest of the shows that Football Guys is going to be pumping out this offseason and into the season, which is just getting closer and closer and closer. We've only got a few more episodes. Well, not a few, but, a few more months until we actually have football to talk about, and I can't wait for it. Anyway, thank you once again for tuning in. We will see you next week. Enjoy the